When the Chargers finally cut down their roster at the end of training camp, this could be a team that's missing a lot of familiar names, and Donald Parham Jr. could be one of those big names that's on the outside looking in.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, or listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, every single year there is going to be turnover on an NFL roster. But this year for the Chargers, I think it could be extremely different. With a new head coach, a new general manager, they're going to want their guys. And I think that is definitely going to manifest itself. One of those main casualties, I think, is going to be Donald Parham Jr., a guy who has stuck around the last couple of years, but has dealt with some injuries, and I just don't know if he's going to be a fit for what this offense is going to look like in 2024. And then, of course, other guys that are on the bubble, like Brenden Rice. I know that's a big name a lot of people are very excited about, but his spot on this roster is far from certain. He is going to have to earn it in training camp, and another former third-round pick is probably going to be packing his bags as a member of another team in 2024.
It's going to be crazy. I think with the new regime, I think it could be an exodus of formerly drafted players, guys who had an impact on former teams that just aren't going to make this squad straight up. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. David, what we wanted to do today with training camp coming down the barrel quickly, and tomorrow we have undrafted free agents we like to have a shot to make the team. We're going to start off next week with training camp battles offensively and defensively before getting into our training camp primer on Wednesday when things actually kick off. We're so excited about it. But today we wanted to talk about the guys, about where our feelings are right now, or some guys that have had impact roles on this team in years past, or even rookies they just drafted this year that are on the bubble. And if we think going into it, the vibes right now, if they're going to make the team or not. And it starts with Donald Parham Jr., which, David, I think even with the team going in a different direction philosophically, he would still be a surprise cut if he found himself on the outside looking at.
No, for sure he is. Donald Parham Jr., obviously, when you look at him and what he's done on the football field, you're thinking to yourself, how could I possibly cut this guy? This is a guy that has scored a touchdown every 6.7 receptions in his crazy NFL career, which is absolutely insane. And, for a man that's 6'8", he is deceptively quick, and he does have some shake and bake. He is a yard after catch player who has really kind of, stood out in that frame of the football field. But unfortunately for Donald Parham Jr., he's just not a good enough run blocker. And I think that really plays a huge factor in the decision-making of this team and where this offense is going, from a team that was more pass-heavy and more pass-focused to a team that wants to run the football a lot more. And I just don't think Donald Parham Jr.'s game is the Chargers are looking for going forward.
Yeah, I think he's absolutely squarely on the bubble. I'd say the other thing that factors into it is the part where he missed OTAs with, trying to recover from an injury that sidelined him at the end of last season. So I think that's the big thing is, hey, you have to be on the field to show that you should still be on this team. It is going to be a numbers game, and a lot of it's going to have to do with how many tight ends do you plan on keeping on this roster, and how much do you need the tight end that you have on the field to be a well-rounded guy that can do both pass catch and also be able to run block and pass block when you need him to. And Hayden Hurst, I think, was the worst run blocking tight end in all of the NFL last year, and they will have him. But what that means, though, also is that Donald Parham Jr. is at most the second receiving option at tight end on this team right now. And when you really think about it, if he makes the team, we'll probably have the third most snaps at the position behind Hayden Hurst and also Will Dissly if everyone's healthy. Think the thing with him, I think he's going to make the team. I think at this point, I don't know how, it depends what you think of Ben Mason, right? They're going to keep Ben Mason as a tight end or as a fullback. Is it going to take away from the spot you would have given to a running back? Or does it take away a spot from a tight end? And also you would need an undrafted free agent tight end unless you think the Chargers are keeping, less than 3 tight ends. Because I think it would be in this order right now as we head into things: Hayden Hurst, Will Dissly, Donald Parham Jr., and somebody's going to have to take that spot. So Smart on the other hand, because another thing is just like, he has a chance to be a legitimate red zone weapon. He's coming off his best season, 285 yards, 4 touchdowns, which are both career highs, 27 catches, career high. And also, you don't have Mike Williams anymore to be that kind of red zone target, the throw it up 2-guy target. You have a guy here who's 6'8", that maybe they can find that role for him just in red zone packages and things like that. But I don't feel as strongly about Stone Smart. To me, if we're talking about the vibes right now going into training camp, I have him not making it. And worse run blocker than Stone Smart, even though than Donald Parham, but neither of them are really good. And I just think that these undersized tight ends that really are never going to be inline blockers, if they're going to keep Donald Parham Jr., I can't imagine them keeping another guy who's a liability in run blocking with Stone Smart.
Yeah, Stone Smart ranked 82 out of 83 tight ends and run blocking with a grade of 31.9 according to PFF. So obviously Stone Smart is a guy that was transitioning from quarterback to tight end. So this is, I think, year 3 in his transition to tight end. This is another player here that I just don't think his profile and more the height weight situation is what's going to fit with what the Chargers want to do and want to play the smash mouth brand of football that they want to bring to the table. Yeah, Stone Smart's had a couple of nice catches. I think he's a weapon in the seam. I feel like he can make some plays in that avenue of things, but it's just too few and too far between. So for me, I have Stone Smart getting cut.
Yeah, he had the 51-yard touchdown against the Packers, which was awesome. I don't think he fits. I think he finds himself on the outside looking in. But what about Isaiah Spiller, former 4th-round pick by the Tom Telesco, Brandon Staley regime? He's a guy that hasn't caught on now heading into year 3, and you have 3 guys that are making it in front of him, according to me, at the very least: J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Kamani Vidal. David, as we're looking at it going into training camp, is Isaiah Spiller making it or not making it?
Yeah, so for Isaiah Spiller, obviously very, very little production, but also very little in the form of opportunities. He's only had 55 carries in his 2 seasons with the Chargers, and it just feels like, to me, he's never really got a fair shake. But he has the size, and I feel like he has the in-between the tackles running ability that the Chargers are going to want to covet. And I feel like Isaiah Spiller has been waiting for an opportunity to kind of fit into an offense that's probably more of a running offense, and his prayers got answered when Greg Roman was hired as the Chargers offensive coordinator. So as much of this might be a surprise to some, I have him making the team, and I feel like he's going to get more carries this year than he has the last 2 seasons combined.
Really? You think he's going to have more than 55 carries as the 4th running back on this roster this year?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it. I mean, I have him on the outside looking in. You said he's at a small sample size. The problem is in that small sample size, he's also been really bad, right? That's the hard thing. It's like we haven't seen him break anything off. Those 55 carries have gone for an average of 2.5 yards per carry, which is also
he's only
an
gotten
important
like
part
5 or 6 touches in a game. It's just
absolutely
impossible to get into a rhythm.
Where is he going to find the rhythm as the 4th best running back on this team, though? Right? Like that would be my argument.
2 injury-prone running backs in front of him.
Sure, but I think if we're not talking about this, obviously if J.K. Dobbins gets hurt in training camp, I would have a much different feeling on Isaiah Spiller making the roster, because then he bumps up to at least running back 3. It comes down to kind of who you think and what you think they're going to prioritize when they make this roster and how many you think they're going to keep. I don't think they're going to keep 4 running backs and a fullback potentially in Ben Mason. If they want a fullback, Ben Mason has no competition, right? If they're counting him as a fullback. If they count him as a tight end, they have 4 tight ends and 4 running backs. I don't know. We'll see how they put it together. That would be a roster construction where it's just at this point hard for me to just say, hey, this guy's going to make the team at this point. This is the vibe. It feels to me like he's going to have a big preseason, a big training camp to try to make this team in 2024. But there's going to be a lot of hard decisions. Like, what do you do with Brenden Rice, who you just drafted this year, but somehow at this point isn't a lock to make this roster? Will he make it? Will the second of the 7th-round receivers, Cornelius Johnson, make it? We're going to talk about more guys on the roster bubble and if we think they're making the team and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys, though, about LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And anyone can find somebody to turn in a job resume. The difference with LinkedIn Jobs is the quality of candidate and how quickly you can find a quality candidate, because LinkedIn isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, and even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Dave, let's continue getting into some bubble trouble here and talking about some of the bigger, more well-known names that are on this roster that legitimately have a chance of being on the outside looking in when this team cuts down to 53. And when you have an entirely new regime, an entirely new front office and coaching staff, we could see different practices. And the other thing is, they don't have any ties to some of the guys where maybe we feel like we've seen some flashes and just need more of an opportunity. They're coming in with their guys, right? And they drafted guys and signed guys that they like, which is going to make some familiar faces potentially really on the wrong side of the tracks. But I think the interesting thing is what they do with their rookies, because they took 2 wide receivers in the 7th round. Nobody thinks Ladd McConkey is on the roster bubble at all. But 7th round picks aren't always safe in general. And the Chargers have 2 7th round picks that are both playing the same position. The other interesting thing here is they look right now as if they would be at best wide receiver 6 and 7, assuming you believe that Darius Davis is safe on this roster. I'm not going to put Darius Davis on the roster bubble. He's an all-pro return man. They will find a place for him. You brought back Ryan Ficken. I don't think Ryan Ficken's letting Darius Davis go anywhere. But then you have Brenden Rice and Cornelius Johnson, 2 guys that both bring kind of different things to the table that you're looking at, and you can't really feel great either way about saying if for sure one of them is going to make the roster at this point. So if you're looking at Brenden Rice first, David, at this point in the offseason, do you think he's making the team?
Yeah, so for Brenden Rice, obviously, you know, he has a pretty, I would say, nice size, height, weight situation that you like when you're looking at your wide receivers. 6'3", 210. Obviously, he's the son of one of the greatest wide receivers of all time with Jerry Rice. Excellent blocker. You know, a guy who keeps working. You know, has some strong hands. Keeps working for his quarterback. You know, can put in his foot in the ground and really kind of, you know, stop and start quickly. You know, he has some traits that you know that you would really like and would really covet from the wide receiver position. So I think with that being said, I do have Brenden Rice making the 53-man roster. I mean, this one it's tough, obviously, because they saw elements and things between both of these 7th-round wide receivers that they liked. Obviously, you know, wanting to pull the trigger to bring him into the fold. I just think that Brenden Rice's game, being a little bit more well-rounded, is what's going to earn him the spot.
Yeah, I think the thing about Brenden Rice, too, is it feels like he could play a position you're very thin at, which is that X wide receiver on the outside, which, you know, just because Quentin Johnston has the size for it doesn't mean that's the best place to put him. We saw how bad it was to put him there for the entirety of the 2023 season. So right now, you're looking at Joshua Palmer, DJ Chark probably taking up a lot of those snaps. Who is it after that? And I mean, the next guy you look at that makes the most sense is not Ladd McConkey. It's not Darius Davis. It's Brenden Rice. And he does make a lot of sense. And I think the other part with Brenden Rice, why I think he makes it, is it just seems very easy to see him making the plays he would have to make to separate himself from potentially a Cornelius Johnson, or just to show the coaching staff, hey, I'm worth a roster spot, right? I'm making big plays. I feel a need that you don't really have in spades right now, and I'm someone that's worth putting the time and effort to develop that. Maybe I can be one of your, you know, top 3 or 4 receivers down the line. And I think Brenden Rice absolutely has that potential to be that going forward. And I think he is worth trying to see what you can get out of him. And also, hopefully he hates the Chiefs just like his dad, if you haven't seen the video floating around from Lake Tahoe over the weekend. But what about Cornelius Johnson? Because he's the second of the 7th round picks. He was picked 253, only 4 picks before being Mr. Irrelevant, but also was the best run blocking wide receiver that I scouted last year and played at Michigan with Jim Harbaugh. So, David, you have Brenden Rice making it. Does that mean right now you think Cornelius Johnson's on the outside?
Yes, it does, unfortunately. I just think, when you look at the roster construction for the Chargers and how many different wide receivers that they have, there's just only so many spots to work with. So with Cornelius Johnson, has good speed, is an excellent run blocking wide receiver. But I think one of the things that is kind of a big detractor for him is the drops. He had 15 drops in his last 3 seasons, and he's not much of a yak threat either. So, I think with that, he's going to have to prove that, his hands are sticky and he's able to catch every single pass, and his run blocking is going to have to shine. He's going to have to make play to be able to beat out Brenden Rice, because in my mind, it's one or the other. And in this specific situation, I think it's Brenden Rice, and I unfortunately see Cornelius Johnson not making the 53-man roster.
And I'm sure they would try to get him on the practice squad if they did decide to leave him off, right? I do think, though, that it is the drops that you could see, hey, maybe a few drops make him too concerned to want to take that chance on him. But that his coaches know who he is at the same time. Yeah. Did flash some big play ability, back-to-back 50-plus yard touchdowns against Ohio State in 2022, not as much in 2023, but also played at the disadvantage of being on an extremely run-heavy collegiate football team with Michigan, who wouldn't give many wide receivers a ton of chance to shine. It was basically Roman Wilson, and it was hard for anyone else to put up meaningful numbers when you run the ball as much as Jim Harbaugh and they did at Michigan. So I think that's part of it, too. I would say at this point, he wouldn't make it. I do think there's a possibility the Chargers keep 7 wide receivers, especially when you have a lot of young guys and a lot of question marks at the top, where it's like there's not a ton of certainty in that room right now. Let's see what we have here and see who can kind of rise to the top and potentially be something more. But at the same time, if you're going to be the team that runs the football that much more than you did before, how many roster spots are you willing to spend on that? Or would you rather put that towards more offensive linemen with the attrition you faced at that position, more tight ends, more running backs, or guys that seem like they would fit more what this offense is going to be in 2024? It's hard to say at this point, but that's why I don't think both of those guys are safe. If I had to lead one direction, I would lead Brenden Rice at this point in the offseason, and I'm excited to revisit it later when we actually see what these guys are doing in training camp. Let's talk about another one here, David. Alex Leatherwood, a signing that when they signed him, we said just because they signed him doesn't mean he's making the team. Didn't play at all last year, has been really poor when he has played at the NFL level. Do you have him making the team or missing the cut?
Yeah, so for Alex Leatherwood, I wasn't really that thrilled about the signing to begin with, because he just wasn't that great. I mean, in 2021, played 847 snaps at right guard, 257 at right tackle, gave up 8 sacks, allowed 17 hits, and gave up 65 pressures. So unless he is making a true complete 180 resurgence in career, I do not see him making this Chargers 53-man roster. I like the fact that Joe Hayes is leaving no stone unturned, and he's going to give people opportunities, and he has one. He has a chance to make the team here with to be a backup offensive lineman. I just don't think it's going to happen for him and the Chargers. I have him getting cut.
Yeah, I mean, and there's not a lot in his history that would lead you to believe, that he should make the team. At the same time, I feel like he's going to make the team, and this is kind of how we feel right now. But you also have to think, David, that his main competition right now is who? Foster Sarell? Yeah. Are we that confident in Foster Sarell, or Foster Sarell, however you say it, that he is going to be able to beat out a former first-round pick? Because it's not like his record is pristine anyway. So if it's between those two guys, I don't think they're keeping 4 guys and Jamari Sawyer, who has tackle versatility as well, even though they've been playing him mostly at guard. But after Alex Leatherwood was signed, it seemed like every practice note that I got was the second team, the starting right tackle was Alex Leatherwood. So the fact that this team has Alex Leatherwood and seems committed to keeping him at tackle, which he hasn't played since his rookie year in 2020, is interesting to say the least, but that's just the vibe I'm getting right now. Is it feels like this dude has a legitimate chance to make the roster, and maybe if it's between him and Foster Sorrell, they feel like, hey, more of a chance we're going to get some return on investment of a former first round pick, a guy probably who fits better if you want an additional offensive lineman to just rogue grade people, as a dude who actually can run block a little bit, which is absolutely terrible in run blocking. I don't know. It's just where the vibe is. It's not like he has this, he got cut by the Raiders after one season after being a first round pick. And I mean, the Raiders aren't known for making good draft picks, but most of them last more than one season, I would say, even the terrible first round picks that they've taken. But we do have more guys that are on the roster, including JT Woods, a former third round pick, who, David, it's impossible for me to say right now that he is going to make the roster, which is crazy because there's not that much competition in that room. Yet I'm still saying might be packing his bags when things are all said and done at training camp in 2024. So we're going to get into that. And Tony Jefferson, if he will find a way to stick on this team. And what about Chris Rumph and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because I love sports and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. And all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers, not just new customers, with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And right now, I'm looking at the Open Championship because there's no baseball going on tonight. I'm looking at the Open Championship this weekend where you can get Scotty Scheffler, the world beater, at plus 450 to win it all. If you're looking for better odds, though, you can take a flyer on Xander Schauffele, who pulled home his first major this year, or Bryson DeChambeau at plus 1,800. Schauffele at plus 1,100, but DeChambeau, who's coming off of winning the U.S. Open only a month ago, you can get him at plus 1,800 to get back-to-back major championships. So make sure you guys check that out. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. David, I want to continue talking about some of the bigger names on this Chargers roster that really find themselves going into training camp on the roster bubble, and some guys more than others just on the outside looking in, where it feels like they're going to have to pull off some miraculous things to find their way back on this roster after playing roles with the Chargers over the last couple of seasons. And I want to start here with a third-round pick in JT Woods, and if he'll even get the chance to kind of show that the Chargers made the right move drafting him there after 2 seasons that have been abysmal by the standards I think you would hold the third-round pick to as far as the return on investment there. But I want to make sure everyone is checking out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 national sports streaming channel that is going on right now, the first of its kind, where you get wall-to-wall sports coverage every hour of the day, but with the local analysts that cover their teams every day, giving you all the insights that you need. So make sure you guys go subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or find them on the free Amazon TV Fire TV channels app. David, let's talk about JT Woods. Oh, man, the JT Woods experiment. Someone that we knew coming out of college, coming out of Baylor, where he led the NCAA in interceptions coming out, that there was one thing he had to do. He had to tackle. And we said, hey, there's a lot to like here, but if you can't tackle, it's going to be very hard to have him on the field. Honestly, at this point, I don't even know if he can tackle because I just haven't seen him on the field enough. At the same time, a clean slate, a fresh start with a new regime and a new coaching staff, obvious physical tools, 4.3 speed, right? The physical tools have not been the problem. Maybe you could say undersized for sure, very skinny, but does he get a chance? Is the third round pedigree enough? Is there enough competition there to push him off of this roster, David? Going into training camp, do you have JT Woods making the 53 or not making it?
I would say that if we saw the ball production that we saw in college from JT Woods in the NFL in his short, stints and his, very few snaps that he has received, I would say yes. I think he is going to make the 53-man roster. But when you don't have any ball production and we know that you can't tackle and you haven't been able to be on the football field for whatever reason that may be, whether that's health or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it was a non-football illness last year. Very weird situation. Hard to speculate on, but, I mean, missed a good chunk of the season because of it.
Right. I mean, like I said, for one reason or the other, I'm not crucifying him or condemning him for that because I have no idea what happened there. But what I do know is what I've seen on the field and unfortunately, what I have seen on the field is not enough to secure a roster spot for a player that has tools, but we have not seen that manifest itself at the NFL level. So I think this is where the buck stops for JT Woods and his time as a Charger ends.
Yeah. It's a position we literally talked about on yesterday's show where you hope that they find another veteran to bring into that room because, like, right now, I would hope that spot would be someone who could, would contribute this season. But I think he might make it. And, like, I think the thing is who's taking his spot? I mean, between him and AJ Finley, neither one of them played 70 defensive snaps last year. The Chargers didn't trust either of them last year. They went and got Dean Marlowe, right? Raheem Lane, another guy where he was a guy for a little bit and got hurt, ended up on injured reserve. Who's going to take it from him? Like, it's just that right now it's Derwin James. It's a Alohi Gilman, and it would need to happen, and not just that. It would have to be other moves happening as well, or other guys making it that you don't necessarily expect to make it. I don't think he really fits the more physical approach that the Chargers are having, generally speaking, even though there's going to be positions that lend themselves to that less than others, or you need it from less than others. You would be having him as a guy you felt like in the back end can make some plays and get some ball production that he hasn't had to this point. I'm actually excited to see what he looks like. I'm excited to see how Jesse Minter wants to use him. I think his best way of making this roster is becoming a special teams demon. I think that with the physical tools that he has, he should be a guy that could excel in a role like that. But he hasn't been able to do that. Has been a healthy scratch a ton of times, as well as missing time with a non-football illness too. Yeah. But if you don't have him making it, David, I'm guessing that means you think Tony Jefferson, after getting at least the contract from that minicamp, will now make the roster, even as a dude didn't play last year.
Yeah, I do have him actually in the Chargers 53-man roster. I think, with his intimate knowledge of the defense and the schemes and his ability to communicate that to other players and his experience, just being able to be in the right place at the right time and, still brings a physical nature to the table as well, coupled with the fact that Derwin James says that he wants Tony Jefferson on the team, and Derwin James's voice is one that is definitely listened to and does carry weight with this Chargers organization. There's no question about that. When Derwin says, hey, I want Tony Jefferson so I can go move around and go do my thing, that definitely means something to me. So with that, I do have Tony Jefferson making the 53-man roster.
I have him making it too. I mean, right now I'd say that Tony Jefferson, TJ, and JT are probably the most likely, just because I don't have anyone that's taking that spot because it's literally so thin. At least right now, but there are some undrafted free agents I think there are to like at that position. I just don't think there's any way the Chargers can go into the season with the only backups to your starters in Derwin and Alohi being AJ Finley, who's played less than 70 snaps at the NFL level, and JT Woods, who played less than 70 snaps and played in 3 games only in 2023, or an undrafted free agent, right? Even if it is an undrafted free agent, can you have that little experience? I don't see it happening. I think Tony Jefferson is definitely making this team. But what about Chris Rumph? Because he's on the roster bubble. Maybe, David, maybe he's just on the outside. I mean, he's the guy we're talking about last right now as a 4th-round pick that has played, over 100 snaps in each of his 3 seasons at the NFL level. Is there any chance he's making the roster, you think, this year? Quickly.
Yeah, so for Chris Rumph, Chris Rumph's, lifeline with the Chargers was on life support when he broke his foot, okay? When the Chargers signed Bud Dupree this offseason, that's when it flatlined. That's the end of the line. Chris Rumph, barring a significant injury in that edge room, is going to be gone. He's getting cut. I don't think there's any other way I see Chris Rumph making this team.
It would have to be them keeping 5 edge rushers. That's the only feasible way that I could see him making the team. It just feels like he's a project that never became more than that. And I think the fact that he hasn't, like Donald Parham Jr., been able to get out there and hit the ground running, it just feels like he would have need to have a perfect offseason, a perfect training camp, a perfect offseason program. Hopefully he's learning, right, and getting himself as up to date as he can with the defense and stuff like that. But until you're going through it, it's very, very tough, and I just don't know when we're going to see him out there. I don't know what the capacity is, and I do know that he is far and away the 5th best edge rusher on this team, and I think it's a team that'll probably keep 4 edge rushers. So I have Chris Rumph on the outside looking in. he's a guy that just, flashed good athleticism and pass rush ability, but was never able to put it together. And I think for a guy that is his size, he really needed to be a pass rush specialist that could be, a liability in the run game, but it didn't matter because you knew the way to use him. And I just think that, 2022 was really the time where he got pressed into action and it just wasn't good. Last year had some good moments, couldn't stay on the field. So I do think it's the end of Chris Rumph, and I think the Bud Dupree move was the move that really finished that. And I think that's one of the bigger improvements you have on this roster, that all of the snaps that Chris Rumph has got the last 3 years are now going to someone like Bud Dupree, and that shouldn't be understated. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show as we continue barreling towards training camp next week. Tomorrow we are getting into the undrafted free agents we think have the best chance of making the 2024 opening 53-man roster. And there's a couple I really, really like. So make sure you guys don't miss it. Go subscribe or follow for free on Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on our social media. You can find us on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer at DroTalkSD. But that's going to wrap things up. Thank you guys for making us your first listen. As always, we are your team every day and the only people putting out daily Chargers content all year long. And we're 5 shows a week. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.